Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. I am Harry. I will be your favorite realtor and go to for any rental or leasing questions as it relates to real estate. And I wanted to make my first video to really go and look into how we approach renting as well as leasing and what it is that you should know before you consider renting or leasing. And before we start anything, I always tell my friends and anybody close to me, anytime I make a move, literally and figuratively, anytime I leave the house, money is involved. There's a cost associated with everything that I do, and it goes the same for you. So when we look at the process of renting or leasing a particular property, the very first thing you want to consider is going to be your finances, right? Taking into consideration what it is that you can afford, what is going to be considered affordable housing. And right here, I want to make sure that we focus on that we're budgeting wisely, right? It's one thing to have base rent, but there's also the additional cost associated with utilities if the property that you're looking at does not have them included. And when we look at what is considered affordable housing, um, it shouldn't really exceed more than 30% of your monthly income. So let's just say if the base rent on a property is going to be $1,000 and you make $3,500, of course, a third of that will keep you in that range of making sure that you can make your $1,000 rent payment, of course, and maybe any associated utilities with that particular property. Now, you want to make sure you also look at any upfront cost. One thing I always tell my clients, my rental clients, when we go out in the field, one thing that I always look for when I look at a property, what is my potential renter going to have to pay up front? I always say, again, as I just stated, moving is expensive, but what's going to be included? So being cognizant of first month rent, last month rent, security deposit. I know with most of your um, larger structures with many units in there, standardized apartment buildings. Um, Typically, I know they offer up, you get 1 month free, you get, 2 months free. But somewhere along the line, there are associated upfront costs that they still want from you, even though they're going to give you that month free. And they also might give you the option of spreading that out and deducting that from your base rent over the time of your lease. But all in all, you still want to consider what is going to be the upfront cost. And second to that would be application fees. Of course, these are going to be non-refundable. Of course, they're looking at your credit and doing any other background checks before they say, okay, looks like you're going to be good enough. Are you qualified to actually have this particular property? So those are things, if we consider the money of it all, before you even start your search process, that should be one of the very first things that you do consider. What can I afford? You want to also want to consider what is the lease agreement details, right? Um, Sometimes when we move to places, our owners may offer up a month-to-month option. Usually, that's going to be the most expensive to follow with 6 months and 12 months leases. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in regards to the ability to get a month or 2 months free, more than likely, those apartment complexes are going to ask you to sign a 13 or 14 month lease with them. So if you look at that, is it really free? Are you really winning when it comes to that? Something else you want to look at is when is your rent due? Um, Most of the time, we're going to say it's going to be due on the first. And depending on when you get paid, is that something that you will be able to swing by the first of every month? Can you pay them, a little bit at a time up to the first of the month, excuse me. But you want to know if there's any grace periods. Things happen. I can't speak for myself, but we all know somebody that at some point in time something may have changed, and it's like, oops, I wasn't expecting this particular expense to happen, but I still have to pay my rent. I want to make good on that. So understand, is there any grace periods, or is it just a drop date and everything has to be due by the first? Or do you have a 3 day grace period, meaning within the 3 days after the first of the month, you have the ability to pay your rent without any penalty? And that's my third point here. Are there any late fees? You want to make sure that you understand any charges that are associated with your rent. Is there an annual, depending on the type of space that you rent, is there I can't think of the name of it right now, but any luxury cost or an amenity fee. I know I rented a place where there was an amenity fee that was charged once a year. You want to make sure that you do understand that too. And also, what are your renewal options? When the lease is over, what is the expectation for you to continue with this particular property, go to another property? What is the expectation, and when do you actually have to let them know when you're going to renew? I know most properties, or a lot of properties rather, I will not say most, okay? Some might ask for a 60-day notice, and some might ask for a 30-day notice. And, just you want to make sure that you really do read those lease agreements, and are always going to be informed as to what exactly is required of you when it comes to renewing or even non-renewing. Because of course, it's your option. You have options when it comes to choosing housing. What are your rights and responsibilities as a tenant? I think a lot of times we blindly sign documents and assume, well, they'll cover it. Well, depending on the property that you go to, they may in fact not necessarily cover it. So, of course, you want to look at what are your tenants' rights and privacy. Tenants' rights. So, of course, your privacy. Roslyn just called. That's my friend, my really close friend. She's a realtor in Mississippi. So, if you're looking for a rental in Mississippi or even to buy or sell, Roslyn is going to be your point of contact. But anyway, getting back to tenant rights, privacy and eviction protections and habitability. Can you actually live in this place, right? When is it going to be to a point of where, hey, if the lights go out, the water goes out, what is expected of you as a tenant, as well as what is expected of the property owner as, landlord or property manager, right? You want to understand what is associated with your tenant rights. Also, second to that would be the landlord duties, okay? Hey, who's responsible for repairs? I know, speaking of Rosalind, we talked about, some owners, if you rent a home, they may say, hey, if the expense is less than a certain dollar amount, you're responsible for replacing that. So let's say if any repair is less than, I'll give a number of $300. They may say, hey, that's you. You're responsible for that, not necessarily them as a landlord. So you always want to make sure you're up to date and aware of what that may be. And also renter's insurance. If anything happens to that property, there are instances where, definitely if it's a shared space, and even if it is not a shared space, I live in Philadelphia, and a lot of, our housing is not single family detached homes. A lot of it is row housing if you're not in a traditional apartment complex. So if something happens next door, is your property and items in your home protected? Get renter's insurance, and it also may be a requirement upon moving in your particular unit or property that you have to have and show proof of that. But you want to make sure that you're able to replace every item that is in your house. That's what that's going to cover. And the property itself. You don't want to move into a place where there's signs of termite damage, any kind of pest or things of that nature. Inspect your property, inspect it. And prior to moving in, you want to make sure that you document everything. Take pictures, and make sure you complete the move in checklist. We see that a lot of times people say, oh yeah, everything is good, but is it in fact good? Did you turn on the water? Did you attempt to turn on all the lights? Did you open and close all of the doors? Did you travel upstairs and downstairs, assuming that the property has multiple levels? Did you use the elevator if the unit that you're occupying or going to be occupying has an elevator? Turn everything on and approach that as if you're actually already living there. You also want to know, hey, what about the utilities? What's included? And again, as I said, does it even work, right? Did you cut the lights on? Did you cut the gas on? Did you cut the water on? Did everything that you're going to utilize when you occupy that unit, is it operable? You want to make sure you check into that. And if we look at the neighborhood factors, right? Sometimes it could be the entire city, or it could just be ruled to a particular area. One thing that you can do, you can look into the FBI, the crime data, excuse me, not crime data. I'm from down south, so you have to excuse me. The crime data explorer. You can search that for the city and area that you're going to look at. And you may even want to look at the local police department's website, right? So for me, let's say in Philadelphia, you can get the Philadelphia Police Department and look at their crime statistics. You know, if you're in Dallas, Texas, look at Dallas Police Department's crime statistics. Go to their website and check that out. And also, you want to see how is transportation going to work, right? So let's say if you're moving to Washington, D.C., more than likely you're not going to be driving your car. But while many residents do choose to drive their car, even in Philadelphia, you know, we do have public transit here, the railways that you could utilize, or you could use, you know, the buses above ground. So there are many options that you want to take into consideration when you are looking at a particular property, as well as a neighborhood to locate to. How far is that commute going to be from work? I know when I chose to live in Philadelphia, my primary job is 50 miles away. So I had to be close to the highway. So that was one thing I wanted to take into consideration, you know, to get to and from. And also, if you're looking at a particular property, go different times of day. Go early in the morning, go around midday, and go in the evening. Go on the weekends if you say, hey, because remember, your lease is a commitment. You know, that's a legal document. You're committed to that place for said specified point of time, unless you're going to buy out and pay out early to get out of there. You know, just check out the noise and the energy of the place. There are red flags that you want to watch for. A lot of times, like I spoke about earlier in this particular video, you know, hey, 2 or 3 months free. Well, okay, that may be too good to be true. Is that realistic? Am I signing my life away? Just look into it, you know. And of course, you always want to make sure that you get documentation, and it needs to be a written lease. Definitely, you know, if it's someone that you know, um, if it's not, you know, if it's really going to be something formal that you're entering in, you know, make sure you get some form of documentation. Beware of like cash only type places. You want to make sure, even if it is, get a receipt, right? But you really don't want to explore that. If that's the only way that the particular owner is going to accept that, I wouldn't suggest it. But there are some that might say, well, hey, just pay me cash. So all in all, you want to make sure you know your rights and responsibilities, as well as your particular budget. You don't want to skip the inspection. You don't want to skip the inspection. Check that property out. Take somebody else with you. You all look at it together and turn everything on and off to make sure that it is operable. And of course, you want to make sure that you're asking questions before signing. You don't want to just sign and commit yourself to a 12-month, 6-month, or even month-to-month commitment and not be fully aware of what it is that you're getting yourself into. And again, protect yourself with documentation. Ultimately, it does depend on you. So make sure you get it in writing. All right. Have a great day.